Hi, welcome to Let's Talk. This is a show where I introduce you to some of the interesting people that live in our community here on the East End. I love to hear their stories. I love to hear how they ended up in East Hampton or how their ancestors ended up in East Hampton. It's always an interesting story. So I hope you'll enjoy my guest today. His name is JB DSantos. And as you know, JB, I asked you to send me photographs.
Yes.
We haven't really talked about the photos ahead of time, so you're going to tell me all about them. I'm going to ask you the questions that everybody out there is going to ask you. So I'm going to start with the very first photo, which appears to be some ancestors. Is that correct?
Yep, we are just opening Pandora's box. Barbara, thank you for having me over. Those are my grandpa, João Valentim, and my grandma Marta, my aunt Wanda, and my dad, João Batista.
So the little guy is your dad.
That's correct. It's 1947. My papa was 11 years old back then. And that's where I come from.
And where was this?
That was in Brazil. We're in the northeast part of Brazil where my papa was born. And then later they made their way to the south of Brazil, Midwest, and then south of Brazil.
Okay. Now the second picture is
Well, those are my parents. My dad kind of spooked because he's all of a sudden he's getting married. He was, I believe, 18 years of age, and my mom, Odette, who is now 87, and getting married 1950. My dad was 18, so 54, 1954. That's when they were getting married.
That's a great picture.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, on the 3rd of May, we celebrated the 17th year of the departure of my papa. He was quite young.
Oh,
and
that is
all
way
of a
too
sudden,
young.
Yeah, he left us. We never thought. We always thought he was going to live to be 100 because he was definitely a Hakuna Matata.
But you still have your mom.
I still have my mom, and she enjoys coming to East Hampton and
Yeah.
posing for photos by flower pots and everywhere.
Did they get married in Brazil?
They did. They did get married in Brazil.
Okay. Now, where is this? This is a fascinating photo. Tell me about this.
Yes, that is in a place called Ivinhema in the Brazilian Midwest. After my mom and dad got married, they moved to the south of Brazil by Iguaçu Falls, across from the Argentinian border. And then in 1964, my dad and my family, grandpa included, with a bunch of Germans, Austrians, Polish, they all left the south of Brazil and went to the Midwest. And they basically founded this town that is called Ivinhema. Ivinhema is a Tupi Guarani word, and that's what we encountered when we first arrived in Ivinhema. And growing up, I used to swing from the vines, from the trees.
I was going to say, looks like Tarzan country.
Yeah,
Right.
I was called a mini Tarzan because of the circumstances back then, but I used to climb trees like those and hang upside down. And when we first arrived in town, there were no homes basically. So my dad and my uncle Josie went into the forest, and with a two-man saw, they took down trees and they cut boards, and they then made a 4-room house for us with a stopped on mud floors, and life was beautiful.
Wow. So they were like the early, the settlers, the early settlers in this area.
That is correct. We were surrounded by indigenous people, and I grew up with the indigenous people. I still have friends there who are native Brazilians, indigenous, and people. And when we went to visit with my children, one of them, their kids would take my kids into the jungle with bow and arrow and teach them how to hunt or just to play.
So if your family wasn't indigenous, did they come from Spain, your ancestors?
No. We have no Spanish whatsoever.
Okay.
My DNA tells us that I am 20% African American. 14% indigenous because my grandma was black with indigenous people, and therefore I have that mix. And the balance is primarily Portuguese from the Azores.
Portuguese, okay.
But I also have a little bit of Korean or Asian, and then um, I think Pakistani or Afghani. It's a melting pot.
Yes.
My DNA.
It is fascinating doing your DNA, isn't it? I mean, because I've done it as well, and you see so many places, that your ancestors were. I find it interesting.
Barbara, with the DNA testing, you can find out so much. I'm one of 10 kids. I'm number 6 out of 10. And so I am in the middle of the color spectrum, because one side I have everyone being white, light eyes, sometimes blue eyes. And the other side is black. And I remember my brothers having like afro and all that stuff. And when you look, and but again, it's from the mixing of my grandpa, a white man with a black indigenous lady. And
I love the TV show that Gates does, Finding Your Roots. I think. And I often say at the end of it how ridiculous racism is. If everybody did their DNA, they'd find out that they have DNA from all kinds of races,
yes, I have had the chance, the opportunity to meet with Gates. I was invited to an event where only 15 people were invited, and I was among the 15 folks in graduate school. And I discussed with him because he was launching a software back then. And after that, when he was on NPR, I called in, and I still have the tape of that meeting we had so many years ago when I was in graduate school. And I talked to him about everything, and we were talking about the DNA and his a program that he hosts, I believe, on PBS.
Yes,
or
Finding
yeah, I've
Your Roots.
watched
It's
a couple of
fascinating.
times. Yeah, it's fascinating. If you look to the back, we learn a lot about the present and what we can foresee in the future.
Right. It's very interesting to get back there and see where your ancestors came from. This must be you.
Yeah,
Right.
I was very good looking back then.
Oh, of course. Adorable.
I was 10 years old then, and this is something that, my grandma was the Shah woman in town. We didn't have a hospital, we didn't have a pharmacy, we didn't have anything. We had a vet. And my grandma, Marta, was the most educated person in town, and she was a Shah woman and the midwife. So she was basically the mayor in town, but I was born, somehow I had seizures. And I would just plop, and then later I would come back. And my grandma, believe it or not, made a promise that if my seizures stopped, she would let my hair grow and only have my hair cut in a special place in the northeast part of Brazil, in a church carved in a mountain. And then they would braid my hair. One braid would stay at that church, and the other braid I would bring back home with me. Therefore, growing up in the Brazilian Midwest, where you had the cowboys, we didn't have running water, electricity, nothing until I was like 15 years of age. When the cowboys came into town, because I was shining shoes, we were extremely poor. And so I was shining shoes, I was selling oranges, chicken, star fruit, everything on the streets. And the cowboys would look at me and call me names and, bully me. So to
Because of the long hair.
because of the long hair. And my grandma being black, she always loved colors. So in the 60s, for someone with long hair in a town with 500 population, wearing pink pants, purple pants, green pants,
Yes.
I was quite a character, and so everyone would make fun of me, and therefore my parents did not send me to school because they were afraid of the kids bullying me. But then at age just about turning 10, they decided, my grandpa decided to send me to school, and so that's me in first grade in about 1970. And
You look very studious. You look very serious and studious.
Yes. So that's how I was, and that's how I turned out to be, some 40, 50 something.
And the seizures stopped.
Oh, yes. So, interesting enough, the seizures stop. Therefore, you know, we didn't know, and every time we got together with my grandpa, because my grandma died young at 58 of a stroke, and my wife would ask my grandpa, tell me exactly how did the seizures happen, and he would say, you don't need to know. The past is the past. Think about the future. But interesting enough, when my second child was born here in East Hampton, she was 9 months old, and we were in our house here in the village, and she collapsed, and I performed CPR, and my wife called 911, and she turned purple and everything, and so the ambulance came with our good friend Sheila Dunlop, and we went to Southampton Hospital, and we came to learn that she had febrile seizure. That's when the body is at a certain
fever.
temperature, and it spikes up to 104 or so, and the body just shuts down.
Right.
Therefore, what I had as a little kid was most likely febrile seizure, and not the seizure that, I would just collapse, and then later I would wake up and be surrounded by people holding candles and praying, and I'm there.
My sister had that too, so I know exactly what you're talking about, and that does make sense that that's what it was.
So I was the freak in town.
Yeah. Well, and here you are with your wife.
Yeah, that's my beautiful wife. That was in 1984. We were attending a wedding. I first met my wife when she was 13 years of age. That's when I spotted her. And I said, whoa, what a beautiful young lady. And at the time I was 18. So, we were in the same neighborhood. There, I was already in São Paulo.
Okay.
When I had my hair cut, my grandpa took me by bus because my parents couldn't afford. So my grandpa took me on a 3-day bus trip to the northeast part of Brazil where I got my hair cut. And then when we went back to São Paulo, my cousins drove us back to the Brazilian Midwest, Ivinhema, and then they brought my dad to São Paulo, and they brought me along with my dad. And then later my entire family came, my mom and all my other siblings, and the 3 goats, because we had to have goats in São Paulo. And then I ended up going back to school. And then in 1984, I started dating my wife. And we've been together since then. So I've known my wife for 47 years and together 41 years.
That's great. You're behind me, but it's not too far. And this must be your wedding.
That is correct. That's our wedding.
And where was that?
That was in São Paulo, in
Okay.
Brazil, in a beautiful church built by the Portuguese, I believe in 17 something. A church where, in order for you to get married, you need to schedule 1.5 years in advance, because it's a beautiful
Very popular.
venue, very popular, and that was when we got married, and I was just telling my wife, if you don't behave, I'm gonna bite your nose. And I love my baby.
And what time of the year was that?
That was March.
Okay.
March 26, 1988.
So that would have been summer?
That is correct.
Yeah.
The end of summer in Brazil.
Very nice picture.
Thank you.
Okay, and here you are again. Tell me about this.
Yeah, you see, life is unbelievable. When I started learning how to read and write at age just about 10, I would come home and one of my older siblings, he's now turning 69 in June, he used to read a lot. And he taught me the first sentence in English: to bake a cake. I never forgot. And when I started learning how to read, he would give me books. And every night, under a kerosene lamp, over a corn husk mattress, which itched a lot, I would read a book about the great USA. So I would read a book, and then he would give me another one. Then I would have two books, and I would go to the bookstore and swap for one book. And I would read all about the United States. And I would go to my mother and say, Mother, if I'm 30 years old and single, I'm moving to the great United States of America. And my mom would say, zip and get back to work. Because I have to take water from the well for my mom to wash clothes and everything. It's like, shut up and go back to work.
Right.
And sure enough, I turned 30 years old in New Jersey, and that photo was when we first came to the Hamptons, my wife and I,
And
in
what?
1990.
1990?
That is correct.
Okay, and did you just come to rent a place or?
Yes, we first rented a place in West Hampton, and then on the way back home, I told my wife that I loved the Hamptons, and she's like, "Stop, place in the end of the world." And we went back to New Jersey driving a old station wagon, Oldsmobile. And she's like, I don't like it. It's in the end of the world. And guess what? We end up buying a house here and moving here full time from New Jersey.
And what year was that you moved here?
We moved here in 1991.
Did you have an idea of a career or, I mean, what were your plans when you came in 1991?
Well, it's another part of my how interesting life is. When I moved to São Paulo and I studied computer programming, writing computer software, COBOL, Fortran, and all that stuff that the kids have no idea nowadays what it is, the government thought that I was smart and offered me a job to teach airline systems in Brazil. So for 10 years, I taught airline systems, going from airport to airport and to the new employees and everything. And I grew up under a dictatorship. So we had a general. We had to march to class, put the flag up, sing the national anthem, turn in our heels and salute, and walk into the classroom, wait for the principal to inspect, make sure we were all neatly dressed. You may be seated. We had to pray, of course. We prayed before sitting. And then, so growing up in that environment, later when I moved to Sao Paulo, I was kind of a rebel. We were thinking of democracy. So me, being me, I would buy plain T-shirts and I would draw in the back of the T-shirt a caricature of the general.
Oh.
And I would paint the caricature in red. I would put a trident, the tail, and the horn.
Oh, my.
And I would sell them on the streets.
Oh, boy.
And we would go to town, to the center of São Paulo, and march for democracy. And then the cavalry would come chasing us, and we had to run. Otherwise, they would capture us,
Right,
and
sure.
the dictatorship would be gone in a blink of an eye. And so what happened? In 1988, we had elections. We elected a president. So we went moving to democracy. And that president, he died before he
Took office?
took office.
Oh,
And his vice president took over. And Brazil was a big mess. You had 100% inflation per month.
oh boy.
It was crazy, crazy. And so he froze all the bank accounts.
Oh boy.
So if you had $1 million, they would only give you $50.
Wow.
And they said, in a year and a half, we'll pay you back. And I'm a workaholic. I had in excess of 550 overtime hours. And the union said, you cannot work. You have to take 6 months off from work, and the government will pay your salary for 6 months. And then at the end of 6 months, you come back to work. And I said, I don't need the money. I'd rather work. And like, no, you can't. So my manager back then said, why don't you go to the United States? You have family there, and you stay there for 6 months, and then you come back. Your position will be here. So my wife and I, we flew into New York and called my cousins, New Jersey, and 3 days later, I had a job, making very good money. And then my cousin said, well, since you are here, you cannot stay as you are. We have to get your papers and everything. So back then it was easier. So anyway, 6 months came. We had done all the immigration paperwork and everything. And I looked at my bank account. I said, oh, Lord, I have a good amount of money here. I don't want to go back to Brazil. It's my dream to live in the United States. And so I sent a power of attorney to my father-in-law, who resigned on my behalf. And he cried because I had a very good position within the company, and I was well liked. And so I resigned from my job, and I stayed here in the United States.
So you had citizenship within 6 months?
That is correct.
That's amazing.
Well, not citizenship. You had the green card back then. It's the first process. So you first have the green card, and then you wait for 7 years, and then you can apply for citizenship.
Okay.
So while we were here, I went back to college, and then I studied American government. I think from the days when I was little in Brazil, learning how to read and write, that I read all those books about the great USA, the leader of the free world. And so I studied American government and journalism, TV production, filmmaking, and then later on I did a master's degree in 3D animations and compositing of images for films and television.
Okay. And how did you get to East Hampton then?
Well,
What did you do when you came to East Hampton?
we purchased a house in Southampton, but then later we bought another one in East Hampton. And while I was going to college, I was working. I worked for the seafood shop for 10 years.
Okay.
Like the captain of parties.
So you worked your way up doing different jobs to
Yeah.
where now you are.
Well, I'm an associate broker, but when our 30-year-old was born, my wife worked for Cybex in Lake Ronkonkoma.
Okay.
So she left the house at 6:30 in the morning. And so after our child was born, our firstborn, she said, here, you had fun, now you stay home and take care of the baby. And I was already working. I was a member of the film association, a number of associations that when they filmed something in East Hampton or in the area, they had to offer jobs. Like 25% of the crew had to come from the place locally. So I would get phone calls. Hey, can you work 3 days? Can you work 2 days? Sometimes I would go into the city and do things. And so when my wife said, you stay home, and I said, but what am I going to do with my life? I have this
Right.
job. And she's like, sell real estate, honey, you'll be fine.
And you've done very well.
Yes,
So
30
real
years
estate.
later, I've done extremely well, and you know, I think I'm
Doing okay.
doing okay,
You're doing okay.
pretty good, yes, and
Well, the next
I
two-
love what I do.
I have pictures of your babies here, but we're running short on time, so I want to show the last picture, if they can do this in the control room. This is, yeah, there it is, of your family, your beautiful family.
Yeah, that's my beautiful wife and my two girls, Manuela and Samantha. That was the wedding of my soon-to-be 30-year-old Manuela. That was January 7th, 2022, 2023. Yes, at the Bourne Mansion here in Oakdale. And we had a wonderful time. My mom came. We had family members coming from Portugal, from Germany, from all over the United States, and we had about 175 guests. And so it was very exciting to be able to afford a wedding like that to my daughter,
Right.
who is now pregnant and expecting a boy for July. So in July, we're going to be
Congratulations.
grandparents.
That's wonderful. You are like the American dream. You do. You are like the American dream, right? To come
You know,
here and make a
Barbara,
new life.
Reading is my passion. My kids are avid readers, and so is my wife. And I love history, American history especially. Frederick Jackson Turner, one of the foremost historians in America, in 1893, he coined the phrase, "The West has been conquered." By that, he meant Italians, Irish who were coming to America and getting land for free would no longer be able to do that. But what he really meant was, if you come to America now, you have to be able to work hard and you be compensated for
Right.
your work.
And you did.
And I did, because
You worked
America
hard.
is the promised land.
Right.
Again,
Exactly.
another passage about the pilgrims when they got to Massachusetts and they saw the Green
Right.
Mountain. Based on the Bible, what did they say? Pisgah.
Right.
Pisgah, the promised land. So America is the promised land, and we hope it continues to be.
And
So
we love that story. We love the story. I knew I would have an interesting story when you came, so, and we're running out of time, so I just want to say, my last question to you is, when you get to the pearly gates, what would you like to hear God say?
I I would like God to say, "Son, you did well. Before you did anything, you asked yourself, what would Jesus have done had he been in your place?" And if we only ask that question, for sure you do the right things. And I tell my children, and I always told them, before you do anything, don't ever react. Ask yourself what Jesus would
Right.
have done,
Absolutely.
then you act. When you act within reason. When you
Right.
react, everything goes out of control.
Right. Absolutely true.
And one thing, God is good.
Yes. All the time.
If you do the right thing, God will always be in your heart.
Yes.
So,
Yes. 100%. Well, I want to thank my friend J.B. DSantos for sitting here with me today. I also want to thank my sponsors, Whalen and Filer, attorneys at law in Amagansett. And I want to thank LTV staff for all the work they do here. They do such a great job, and for providing community access for us here on the East End of Long Island. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please tune in again and watch another episode of Let's Talk.